paralyzes needed effort to convert retreat into advance.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning from a cloudy London, from an overcast London. The weather's not promising. It won't be promising for the next few days. And let me tell good morning also to Marco Moiso, the Vice President of the Roosevelt Movement. Hi, Marco.
Good morning, Emanuele. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another video of the updates from London series by the Roosevelt Movement. I thought we would talk today about an argument which is sort of monopolizing public opinion and also news media. There has been a couple of days ago around the 5G network, there was the Shadow Foreign Secretary Lisa Nandy, who's a Labour frontbencher, who basically had she basically said the questions remains over the involvement of who's going to build the 5G network that the Prime Minister Boris Johnson had announced. Let me just retrace back a few months. Back in January 2020, so before the whole coronavirus pandemic happened, Boris Johnson had said that the UK's 5G network will be developed, 35% of it will be developed by the Chinese company Huawei. Of course, which had angered, for example, allies of Boris Johnson, including Donald Trump. Also, let's remind ourselves that Donald Trump had banned all any American companies back in 2019 to have any dealings with Huawei. Huawei is, I'm sure everyone is aware of it, is familiar with it, is the world's largest manufacturer of telecoms equipment. And also, he now has got the primacy because back in 2012, he had overtaken Ericsson as the world's largest, and also is the world's second largest manufacturer of smartphones behind Samsung. So we're talking about a global player, a really global player in the communications sector. Anyway, what I was getting at by mentioning Huawei is that although sort of Boris Johnson had made a U-turn about the involvement of Huawei in the UK telecommunications 5G network. And basically what Boris Johnson had said this week, he said, he'd rather invest the money in like domestic companies to develop and the 5G network rather than sort of, commission Huawei in doing that. What I was really interested in is that, although we're talking about the 5G network, so the involvement of a Chinese company, what we've lived in the past 2 or 3 months, as we all know, as we're all aware, is the breakout of this coronavirus pandemic, which in a way has put the Chinese of China on the map. And we've also seen in the past few weeks that there had been some conspiracy theories online about some dubious conspiracy theories that the 5G network was linked to coronavirus, but of course with no position to say that some 5G networks must have been attacked because of that. But what we're leaving aside all these conspiracy theories, which have no, I guess, although the origin of the coronavirus is so dubious and hazy that we can't make, of course, any connection in between the two. But leaving aside all these conspiracy theories, and of course, taking cue from what is happening in terms of 5G network here in the UK, and of course, the shadow foreign secretary Lisa Nandy had said that global alliances could break apart in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic. So you've got coronavirus pandemic on one side, and I guess the 5G network, which is not only in the UK but worldwide, one of the hot topics. of the moment. So, what do you think in terms of like what do you see as the future of China in terms of these two events? The pandemic one side, which again, as I said before, has put China on the map again, and also the 5G network, this kind of U-turn by Boris Johnson that it now prefers to invest like in domestic companies to develop the 5G network. The 5G network. How do you think the West need to stand with China in the wake of these two events? As I said, let me just clarify, these are completely not related to each other, but because there are two topics which have the same protagonist in a way, I wanted to ask you, what do you think the world and kind of in how should other global players like the US, Russia, the EU, how they should play sort of their relations with China, from now on? Sorry for the sort of very long and windy introduction.
It's all very good. Thank you very much, Emanuele. Your question is, quite broad and double-headed, if you want. We are talking about China. We are talking about 5G. Now, before, but it's very interesting. So that such questions allow me to, and allow the respondent to kind of talk about what the context is. Now, before jumping into the specific of your questions, I would like to say that I do not like three words in general. I do not like the definition of conspiracy theory because they once were called scoop. Every scoop has at some point been a conspiracy theory. So we should be careful when we use the definition conspiracy theory. Well, I do not like the same way the word sovereignist, because the sovereignty of the people is the fundamental pillar of any democratic society. And I do not like the word populist, because any politician should work for and in the interest of people. I think that the media, the mainstream media, and the political debate are instrumentalizing these three words in order to manipulate the information. Now, let's answer your question. Now, when we talk about China, for the past few months and years, and also when talking about the Middle East, a lot of people have been also talking about the dawn of the Third World War. I do not believe that we are on the brink of the Third World War, but I think there are a lot of signs that we are on the brink of the Second Cold War. Alexi, let me explain you what I mean by that. We know that in the 1970s, we've adopted the neoliberal economical policies and the neoliberal economical model developed by Friedrich von Hayek. Friedrich von Hayek developed his model because he had one main objective: avoiding war. He believed that by creating a society where economy would overall politics. I hear a lot of typing. I'm not sure what's going on, but anyways, by creating a world where economy would overall politics, and by creating a world where politicians and government did not have a grip on economy, there would be less chances of nations starting wars between each others. I believe that we are now seeing that this is not true, because it's not only economies that compete, but it's also cultural models that can compete one with another. Whilst we try and create homogeneity in the type of economic model at a global level, we should also try and establish some cornerstones of what society should look like in the 21st and 22nd century. I keep on hearing rumors at the background. I'm not sure what it is. Now, how have we come to this friction between China and the Western world? world, I think that we can trace back the beginning of the conflict to 1994 and the Marrakesh Treaty, with which the WTO, the World Trade Organization,
Oops.
I'm not sure
There
what
seems to
these
be a
sounds are, but they're quite constant and
there seems
very.
to be a lot of frying in the background.
Um,
Talking about conspiracy, by the way.
in 1994, World Trade Organization was born, and in 2001, China entered the World Trade Organization. We globalized the financial networks, we globalized the economy, but we did not create institutions that would represent public interests and the public will at the supranational or international level. So what now see is that there is an economic divide and a cultural divide within the Western world and China mainly. From an economic perspective, there is a friction because we know that, for example, China owns most of the public debt of the United States. But more importantly, we see that China is superseding the United States in a number of economical areas. It's the main investor around the world. Actually, the Asian equivalent of the World Bank before it was even created was bigger than the World Bank. And nowadays we see investment and projects that are run and financed by China all around the world. China has become the fastest producer of infrastructures in the world. China has become become the number one country for what concerns the STEM subject, so science, technology, economic, and mathematics. And nowadays it's even become the first economy in terms of overall GDP. Nowadays the Chinese economy is bigger than the American economy. However, there is also a clash in terms of cultural model. China is not a democracy. It's a neoliberal dictatorship ruled by a single party. People do not actually know or appreciate what democracy is. And yet, China is on the verge of canceling poverty. They're just about to cancel poverty within China. There have been huge investment in terms of helping a middle class develop and helping the internal market develop. So nowadays we see, because of neoliberal economical policy, we've got two social and economical models that are challenging each other. On one side, we've got the Western economical model and social model, which is democratic, but it's now seen a progressive polarization between the rich and the poor. The richer are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. And we are competing with the Chinese model, where there is no democracy, but the middle class is expanding, and the poorer are getting richer, as well as the richer that are getting even more richer. But there is still that world is going through a period of expansion in terms of economical rights, in terms of social rights, and maybe in terms of civil rights. Now, there are a number of interesting books that you can read about it, but the Spartan general Thucydides made an analysis in the 4th century before Christ of the causes that brought China, that brought Sparta and Athens to engage in a war. And whereas a lot of commentators of the time were trying to analyze the single conflicts or happenings that then led to war, Thucydides said that every time there is a ruling power that is challenged by a raising power, the ruling power, because of fear, will tend to make a war against the raising power. Now, I think that this is exactly what's happening between the Western war and China. We need to choose, first of all, whether we still deem democracy to be important, whether we still believe that democracy is important. I know that a lot of studies nowadays show that people would want a strong leader ruling over everyone, even in Western society, and that's extremely worrying. But we should also challenge our own economical model. Why have we come to embrace an economical model that's dysfunctional? We should prepare for a Cold War that should never become a hot war. A Cold War is much better because you have
It's more in the background, I
you
guess.
create the context for societies to move at a faster pace without engaging into a direct conflict. But we know that China has been gearing up for a cold or hot war for quite some time. In 2015, China changed the law about the single child. Now China can have the two child per family, which is a form of preparation for a hot war. In 2018, Xi Jinping abolished the term limit. So he is basically a dictator without any limitation in terms of terms. He can stay in power for as long as the party and the leadership and the elite of the Chinese society will keep him in power. And we know even that in 2019, coming to the G5 question, we know that the daughter of Ren Zhengfei, the CEO of Huawei, was arrested in the United States. Her name is Meng, and she's the CFO of Huawei, the Chief Financial Officer. And it's not news that 2 days ago, I think, the newspapers were titling all over the world that actually China and the United States are heading towards a new Cold War. And I believe that we should just decide on which we have to decide on which side we want to be. There are two economical and cultural societal models coming to terms. We have to decide on which side we want to be, and I think we have to come to terms with this.
Absolutely, and I totally agree with you when you say, there's two, not just economic models, but also cultural values, two cultural models. So when we say, well, China's going to be, the next superpower, the world's superpower, we need to also be careful and be more mindful about our words, because it comes with a set of values and principles which might not necessarily, I guess, go with sort of how we've been, our sort of set of values and principles, how we've lived, I guess, so far. So I guess you've raised again a very valid point. So I guess also the entrance of China in the WTO, which dates as far back as the 2001. China was allowed in, although, do you think it was a good move?
Okay, so yeah, very quick answer this time. First of all,
yes,
you're right. We should be careful about the terms that we use. And when I speak about China, I also I'm talking about the Chinese governments and not the Chinese people. The Chinese people are still living in a country that's got a dictatorship ruling over the country. So we should sympathize with the Chinese, and we should potentially help them emancipate themselves from their dictators. So I just wanted to make a difference. When I talk about China, I'm talking about the Communist Party in China and their ambitions, and also I'm talking about supranational economical interests that do not take sides in these conflicts. There are economical interests there are economical powers, lobbies that do benefit when big powers come to terms. We should really uncover who those people are and try and disengage any profits that they might gain from such situation. However, when you were talking about the WTO and China joining the WTO, I'm a liberal socialist, but I am liberal. I believe in the free economy. I believe in free commerce, and I believe even in that finance should be free. I just believe that politics should still have the responsibility of looking after the well-being of people. However, I do believe that international commerce is very important. I do not believe in an autocratic model. I do not believe in borders or taxation. However, you cannot create single markets between economies that are based on very different currencies, and you cannot create a common economic field where there are countries competing, where in some parts of in those countries you've got workers that have got rights and they've got some basically you cannot create a context where there are economies with a strong welfare that compete and a strong currency that compete with companies that are based in countries without any welfare system and that are based in countries with a weak currency, because you create an unfair competition that will lead to a decrease of the sort of any form of social protection in the wealthier countries. I'm all for opening up the economy as long as the economies you open up towards have exactly the same type of laws to protect the labor force, have got the same type of currency, and therefore you create a level playing field where it's the companies that are competing with each other, and it's not cultural economical systems that compete with each other like now.
Thanks, Marco. Let's say a very last question. Do you think that China is? I'm glad we should have probably made that difference early in the video when we said we're talking about China as the the Chinese government, not the sort of Chinese people. But do you think China is becoming? I mean, what's happening around the world? The coronavirus pandemic. Do you think China, because of that, is a sort of wounded dragon? Do you think the sort of China's rise to be the world's superpower is taking a hit, or its rise to be to be the world's largest economy, or to be the world's first superpower has continued uninterrupted? What are your views on that? Because there seems to be especially across the media, I'm not saying anti-Chinese feeling, but seem that China has taken China as a superpower because of what's happened. This kind of pandemic which has swept across the world has taken China as a superpower has taken a hit. What are your views on that?
Well, what I think is that 4 months ago, most of the media portrayed a conflict of interests between the United States and Russia. Russia was still the enemy of the United States in the eyes of most of the world. Nowadays, people recognize that China is the world power that's challenging the United States. I do not think that China is a wounded dragon. I think China is a dragon that has been recognized for what it is, a dragon. I think that's the short answer.
And you think what's happened, with the pandemic and the coronavirus do you think China's taken a hit because of that, or not at all?
I don't think so. I think that, China has exposed itself, has exposed the grip that it has had on some institution like the World Health Organization, that it has had on the African countries, that it has had on the Asian countries for a couple of decades at least. But let's have a look at what's happening in Europe. There are still a lot of politicians that are not taking sides in regards of this new Cold War. There are an increasing number of people that are looking at China with a kind eye. We talk about getting in the good graces of China, and because there are a lot of people that look at what's happening from an economical standpoint and see China as a growing economy and a growing market, a growing internal market as well, of course, but do not see the political implication of taking sides with China. And also China has had the opportunity. Nobody talked in Italy about Trump signing, for example, an order that stated that the United States were going to help financially and technologically Italy to recover from the COVID virus. But everybody talked about the machines, the medical machines that were coming from China. I think that China is not wounded by this conflict. I think that it's now you can play on things. Of course, everything started in China, but now China looks like a country that's recovered before everyone, that's helping everyone, that is actually got an economy that's so strong and solid that can compete with the American economy. They've got a way of ruling that's much more effective than our democratic and slow-moving democratic society. I do not think that they're wounded at all.
Absolutely. And also in terms of, the origin of the virus, there's conflicting reports, although it sort of started off in Wuhan, but the causes of that is all very, the whole topic is very hazy, and, we could, I guess, dedicate another video on that. Marco, thank you so much again. Thank you for your insight and wisdom. For all our viewers, viewers can follow us, our members can follow us on, we've got a Facebook page, Roosevelt Movement UK. We also have a website, www.rm-london.co.uk. Marco, thank you so much again, and I'll see you and all our viewers next week.
Thank you very much, Emanuele, and thanks to everyone who's been following us during this live transmission. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. See you next week.
So first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed effort to convert retreat into a